because the death penalty is an appropriate punishment for murder. But we disagree, for it goes against our 8th Amendment our founding fathers created for American people, stating no cruel or unusual punishments. Because according to current issues of Bob Hibbert on SkySeries.com, lethal injections are primarily used for all of executions of criminals, developed in 1977 by J. Champion, an Oklahoma physicist. But the injections became known as the three-drug cocktail, intended to kill a criminal swiftly and painlessly as possible. Keyword, possible. Because a person can still feel the pain that goes into him. And you don't know how well or developed his immune systems are, because he could have took many drugs for who knows what reasons. The first drug is sodium, which is supposed to make that person unconscious. Second, potassium bromide, which is muscle relaxant, paralyzing one's diaphragm and lungs. And then is potassium chloride, creates a heart attack. Imagine yourself in a very room with a loved one who died from the exact same cause. That would be more awful if you know that person who has a family of his or her own was suffering through that very same thing. Plus, my mom told me that they're changing the ingredients in the injections. A year or so ago, she read a news article of a new kind of injections they did on a criminal sentenced to death. The man's veins popped out of his skin, and he was screaming in agonizing pain for hours until they had to put in the original lethal injections. And therefore, imagine yourself a new kind of injection suffering, making that person suffer through hours until they finally have to end his torture. Therefore, the punishment is cruel and unusual. My opponent also stated it isn't an inhumane deed to sentence a murderer to death, but we disagree, for murder is still murder no matter how one looks at it. Because according to capital punishment is moral justified by Casey Carroll, 2010, says murder is unlawful, malice, killing one person by another. But to mention the death penalty to be lawful and unmalice is wrong because it's carried out by the government. Because terrorists kill in groups, and that's murder. Gangs kill in groups at times, both murder. And the ways we sentence the criminals to death, lethal injections, gas chambers, hangings, those were used throughout Americans' history as murderous ways. Hitler with the gas chambers against Jews, and in Salem witch trials, through the fears of people, through many people's fears, I would have hanged by being accused of being a witch. Do you think those people deserve to be sentenced to death that way as an appropriate punishment? Also, according to Bob Hibbert, political columnist with New York Times Current Issues, Feb 17, 2011, after 27 years on death row waiting in Ohio prison, Frank Spitz was sentenced to death by lethal injections. He was an admired yet harsh Nazi director that went on a killing rampage in 1982, killing these people and thinking of it as hunting parties. Lawyers tried to argue he was mental, but judges concluded he was doing it out of free will. Though when people aren't thinking correctly, they will do things out of free will. We do not know these people, how they process their thinking, or what they go, because they could be mental and just didn't know it. Medicine back then wasn't really developed well to give people the proper treatment if they were mental. So if they did do murderous crimes due to being mental, they had no way of treating it correctly back then. Therefore, one needs to look more deeper into the case before justifying what to do. And sentence a person to death isn't the way to do it, just because he murdered it. We don't need more blood in our world. Thank you.